Hello everyone and welcome back to our final segment of the day and for that matter the week here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Now, like I said before the break, we are going to be transitioning back to the NFL but to a specific game, Sunday Night Football. We talked a little bit about it yesterday in terms of a betting perspective. Now we get to look at it a little bit more from a fantasy perspective, in particular who to start and who to sit. Now I did write a lot of this before, like I always do, so I might have to rejigger it, much like I did last week in that game with the Steelers and the Jets. But I do feel like it's still pretty clear-cut who the danger men in this game are and who clearly is not. And it doesn't necessarily matter with the injuries both teams are going through, who could step up. It's more a matter of who I believe will be forced to step up. Because this is what this game feels like. It feels very forced. A lot of tension in these two offenses. Whether it be through the circumstances the 49ers have been through with injuries, or what the Cowboys have been with just not being able to incorporate enough players outside of Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb into this offense. But without further ado, let's just go into who I personally believe will have to either start or sit in this game. And the first start that I did have was Brandon Ayuk, and so you all can see how that has gone. Now he's out for the season. But I do feel on the 49ers side of things, a player who I'm confident should start, and don't be surprised here, is Brock Purdy. I feel like, that game against the Chiefs was not indicative of who he was. The Chiefs are playing lights out on the defensive side of the football, and it was a game where Brock Purdy, the cards were stacked against him. Now, I personally have him on my bench this week for fantasy football, but the reason why I feel like he warrants a start is because he now understands what the system is without all of his offensive weapons, and he now understands, most importantly, how he has to simplify certain things when this occurs. Because before, it certainly felt like he was going a little too fast and the game sped up for him. Now, I kind of feel like he's had enough games without all of his talent where he's saying to himself, okay, maybe I got to slow things down, simplify some things, and not hype myself up over about how I can have to win this game for my team. And so that's why I feel like this week against the Cowboys defense that really has looked inept, and I don't think will have found its footing after this bye week. Look for Brock Purdy to put up serviceable stats. Look for him to kind of look himself again, to a point where he's managing the game much like he should and feels comfortable, with understanding the circumstances of not having all his weapons around him. Because I still think he's a great QB. It's just that, in certain situations, things might have moved too fast for him. Now, on the sit side of things, there are a couple players on the 49ers who I really have not been impressed by this season in terms of their production for this offense. And one of them has been George Kittle. Now, I know that George Kittle is one of those players who can sneakily get going at any given time. He still is one of the great tight ends in the league right now, but there have been certain moments where I kind of felt like he's playing himself out of plays and not really being effective in terms of the physicality he can bring to this team and what they need from him. So in this game, even though, this Cowboys defense can be exploited with their thinness at the linebacker position at the current moment in time, but I do feel like George Kittle has been an underwhelming player from a fantasy perspective this season. And I don't know whether or not, it's because of the injuries he has to account for or the pressures that he might feel having to compensate for the lack of depth in the 49ers, skill position groups. But at the end of the day, I feel like this is just a game where I can't see Kittle really being that effective. And so while I hope that I'm wrong, I just feel like this is just a situation in which it certainly feels like Brock Purdy might want to start incorporating more people. And what I mean by that is, it's no indictment of George Kittle, but it speaks to the necessity of what they might have to do going forward, should some of these injuries start to project to be longer than expected. So George Kittle should be a sit for this one. In terms of another start for this team, well, Brandon Ayuk was going to be it, but how about, Ricky Pearsall? This is a guy I'm really intrigued to see play in the NFL. This is a guy who was nearly fatally shot a couple months ago. First time on an NFL field where, he's going to have to step up in a big way. Perhaps a wide receiver 2 in this game. And so I feel like he warrants not a start potentially, but a position on your team where you can see what he's projected to look like throughout the season, and you can make a decision from there. I'm not saying he should immediately start by any means because he's still a rookie and this is his first game in the NFL. But there's a situation where you could pick him up off waivers, see what he's like, and then go from there in terms of favorable matchups you could see in his future. But for now, I don't really see another true start on this 49ers team. I like Jawan Jennings, but I don't know how productive he's going to be going forward for this 49ers squad, especially if there's optimism about certain injuries. But again, another sit, I guess you could say. Jawan Jennings could project to be a sit, but I feel like, he's going to do enough for you to either keep him in a flex position or keep him as a bench player. It's just that I feel like there's too many losses on this 49ers team to truly try and figure out who could have a big game rather than who will. So that's the weirdness of the situation with the 49ers right now. Now going over to the Cowboys side of things. And the reason why I become so frustrated talking about the Cowboys from a fantasy perspective is that it's just the same two guys, and any other guy I talk about in any capacity from a fantasy perspective really is from a negative perspective, and it's through no fault of their own because they still have a lot of talent, in my opinion. As Andre enters the chat. Hello, my friend. How are you? Happy Friday. Just chilling, playing the new Black Ops 6. Hopefully it's a good video game and you're having a good experience. Thank you for tuning into today's show, even though we are kind of winding down here. But let's look at the Cowboys before we officially close out the week of shows here. I feel like, like I said, it's the same old story for these Cowboys, where I feel like I forcibly have to say one thing but could have said another, and I sit here and stew about telling you guys how talented the Cowboys is, but the ineptitudes of their coaching and the ineptitudes of the organization as a whole. But I'm going to do it anyways, because we have to entertain this notion and we have to appreciate what these Cowboys can be. Let's start off with the starters here. You have to start CeeDee Lamb. As Andre also asked a question. Quick one, full PPR. Do I start Jayden Reed or Higgins this week? I feel like Jayden Reed in this matchup against the Jaguars secondary might, get slowed down a little bit just because, like I always say, with the Packers it's difficult because of their depth in receiver. But when I look at T. Higgins in this matchup, I kind of feel like the Eagles secondary is diverse enough to slow him down. I know that he's kind of been growing into the season, and a lot of people are hyped about him and his future this season at the very least with the Bengals. But I do think Jayden Reed is the safer play. I do feel that the Packers offense is going to get going. I'm more concerned with the Packers defense, but at least I know that the Packers offense can beat up on this Jaguars defense. It's just going to depend on, how many targets Jaden Reed gets. But I still feel like he's the safer bet here for you. So good luck to you there. But going back to this question and conundrum of who to start and sit for the Cowboys week in, week out, I kind of feel sick to my stomach saying that you have to start CeeDee Lamb week in, week out. Because I love CeeDee Lamb. A lot of fantasy football managers love CeeDee Lamb. But it's just too, vanilla. I want to talk about someone in those wide receiver core outside of CeeDee Lamb who I can say, hey, week in, week out, this is a guy who I would like to see you start. But CeeDee Lamb is so centripetal. No, I don't think that's the right word. So integral, so to speak, for this Cowboys offense. You just can't ignore him. So, unfortunately, I can't really say outside of CeeDee Lamb that any one of these receivers is going to step up. And that's why I have, for my big sit option for the Cowboys, Jalen Tolbert. As Andre said, Kyron is on pace for 15-plus TDs. What an animal he is. I was completely wrong at him. Maybe even 20, adds Andre. I was completely wrong about him to start the season. I was saying that he would regress because we only saw one small sample size season from him, but he has proven me wrong. And he also asks Andre, do I start Kraft or Ferguson? This one feels a bit easier. I feel like Kraft is the start for you. I would like to say Ferguson, but he really hasn't shown me much in this Cowboys offense for me to say I'm confident that he should start week in, week out. Whereas Kraft, I feel like, has proven a lot of people wrong in standing out as the standalone tight end for this Packers team. But that going back to Jalen Tolbert here, I feel like he's the main option outside of CeeDee as the breakout star for this offense, but I don't know. I feel like this team is too predicated on the Dak and CeeDee show, and it leaves me so maddened that I can't introduce you guys to certain players to incorporate into your fantasy squad, but it is what it is, and I don't want to end the show on a maddening note, but we do have to end it here. This has been the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Christopher Shepard. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to view more exclusive short content or content such as this, like, follow, and subscribe. Also, keep on making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Things, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Great way to interact with the show. But other than that, we'll be back next week on Monday, same time as always, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Other than that, enjoy your weekend. Have a good one, enjoying all your football action. I am out.